Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
What's the old saying, be careful what you wish for? In this case, it's job growth. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and this inflammation of unemployment continues to recede. That's a good thing. Now early watchers are saying there is just a whiff of strengthening of wages, which could lead to inflation. We are still a ways away, with 20 to 30% away from the levels of pre-2008 levels of employment, but long-term unemployment trends are lower, and we may just have a new natural level of jobless. We'll kick off this week's dialogue in just a moment with Lou Ebert of the North Carolina Chamber and Lonnie Emard of Columbia-based IT-ology, and later on, Thomas Built Bus boss Kelley Platt is back.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded November 14th, 2014. On this week's program, Lonnie Emard, president of IT-ology, Lou Ebert of the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and special guest Kelley Platt, CEO of Thomas Built. And now, here's Chris William.
Welcome to our program, gentlemen. Lou, good to have you back.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
Lonnie, welcome up from Columbia. Nice to see you too.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with jobs. You know, Lou, so we've been talking about jobs since 2008, and the wheels came off the wagon in the economy, and we just got past the midterm elections, and the elections before that, it was jobs, jobs, jobs. And now the unemployment rate has been ticking down in North Carolina, stands at 5.8%, lower in South Carolina as well. So this is a good thing. There is just a small hint of possible wage inflation if that happens. So a couple questions, Lou. Do we have a new natural level of employment? Meaning, are we going to be around the 4, 5, maybe even 6% of unemployment? And how are jobs now different than the jobs dialogue we were having pre-2008?
Well, I think North Carolina has suffered like most states, and we've had at one point the 4th highest unemployment rate in the country. Today we have the 4th fastest declining rate in the country. But to your point, in 2008, the job creation numbers are now moving at a clip that at the end of this year will be at the total employment numbers we saw in 2007 and 2008. So we're now getting back to the pace that North Carolina is used to running at, which is about anywhere from 70 to 80,000 new jobs a year, which is what we did last year, and we're on pace to do again this year. But again, leading that is manufacturing. It's still a very important part of our economy, a top 5 manufacturing state. The kind of jobs that those look like are very different today than they used to be. But you have a state that by 2030, we need to create 1 million new jobs. So we're actually on pace to do that. But it means a more diverse economy, a more transitional economy, a more transformational economy.
Yeah, Lonnie, to kind of springboard off of Lou's comment about job creation, how do we need to think differently about job creation? You know, we talk about it, we talk about doing jobs, but what are we missing maybe?
Well, I think it's become more and more evident as we live our daily lives that the digital skill set is going to affect every job in the future, right? So you can run horizontally across every industry vertical, whether it's transportation, healthcare, insurance, education, and realize that what is changing is a byproduct of technology. And that's been our main reason for existence as a nonprofit organization, is to be able to bring industry partners, together with academia, together with economic development and the media, to be able to make sure that that message is clear, that we've created a line of sight for what those jobs are looking like in the 21st century, and trying to align education, workforce development, and really a partnership or a collaboration amongst everybody to understand how we have to do that together.
So, Lou, I remember at one of your Future of North Carolina forums, innovation and entrepreneurialism were talked about, and how one needs to be more important than the other. If we had to make a choice, do we want to be innovators or do we want to be entrepreneurs?
Well, I think the states that are going to be serious about competing for the future have to do both. And the entrepreneurs are really the single most valuable talent we have in any state, including North Carolina. So figuring out how to capture the entrepreneurial skill set and marry it up with the innovative activity happening at our universities, for example, that's what we think is the X factor. That's why our Vision 2030 plan, which we introduced about a year and a half ago, looks at entrepreneurship and innovation as kind of a critical fourth pillar that we absolutely have to figure out. And it really kind of reminds us that as we sit here today, there's people in universities right now, young people, busy thinking about our next economy, and we don't even know how that's going to be powered. But that's kind of exciting, but yet, you know, in some ways you wish you knew more about what the future is going to look like. But it's a real sense of possibilities there.
Yeah, and in the same vein, Lonnie, how punitive is this worker skills gap that everyone talks about? The worker skills gap meaning, and I know you know it, but just for the sake of those that might be watching, the idea that we have jobs that can't be filled because there aren't qualified folks to fill those jobs, and that gap has gotten pretty large the last few years.
It's that gap that's kind of created a real crisis in some ways to be able to take action. You know, when we talk about an entrepreneur, spirit, or we talk about innovation as skill set, you know, you have to couple that with what is going to bring to bear transformative change. And I think that's where we're saying that really software is in everything. I mean, if you think about, driverless cars, we could talk about all the change that's before us, much less the way we live our lives with our smartphones, is that we need a population of folks that understand that is not just a consumption issue, a digital consumption, it's creation. And that's what I think we're doing in North and South Carolina. I think we're pushing that notion that starts with the youngest of students and has to be nurtured all along this continuum. And what we yield is some options and decisions that a student population or even a changing workforce, people who find themselves out of work because of a transformative change in an industry, what that yields is where do they turn? What are we providing in terms of this ecosystem to be able to enable military coming back, or whether that's folks that have been displaced because of this? And that's been the role of IT-ology and many other partners. We're not solely the only folks in town thinking about this, but I do think we have to look at it as a supply chain management issue. This is a supply-demand commodity, scarce commodity issue.
And not to interrupt you, Lonnie, we have about a minute left, at least in the first half, and I want to get to this point. So if you're hitting on all 8 cylinders, you get everything right on the process of what you both have talked about. But now we are post-election. We've got the GOP is firmly in charge in North Carolina, in Congress. In South Carolina, they have been for a while. So we've got, is the body language of the General Assembly and the State House, is it friendly to what you're talking about, Lou, when it comes to growing or getting these jobs or manufacturing in North Carolina?
Yeah, we think every day. What's different in our state since 2010 really is we have a pro-business legislature and a governor that come to work every day thinking about how do we grow the economy, put more people back to work, how do we make the state more competitive, and all the things that smart and leading states have to be doing if they're serious about competing for the future. We think we have that kind of environment in North Carolina.
Yeah, what about you, Lonnie?
I would agree with Lou, and I think the other piece to this is it creates an attraction. It's the idea that this skill set is, if it's in crisis mode all across the country, then those who do it differently have a distinctive competitive advantage.
But does public policy in South Carolina lean into what you're trying to get effectively done?
What I've seen is a very openness to realize where, again, those strengths and weaknesses are. And if you've got a weakness in your business, attraction, whether that be, taxation or even just that openness and compliance, I think those are the kinds of things that Governor Haley and others have really thought about. Bobby Hitt has done a wonderful job as Commerce Secretary. being able to identify that while manufacturing has always been a strength, there's so many other aspects of what this technology enabler creates.
Yeah, you know, many have speculated Bobby Hitt might not stay around for the next 4 years for Governor Haley. If he doesn't, how is she going to repeat that home run?
Well, they've done a good job of sharing what has been the process by which we've accomplished some things, and I think that's key, right? So then all of a sudden, you know, replacement planning becomes something that says, hey, we've got to build off what's working.
Yeah, okay. Gentlemen, thank you. We're going to bring our guest out here in a moment. Next week on this program, there is a new sheriff in town up in the mountains of North Carolina, at least up in Boone in the Blowing Rock area. There's a new chancellor at Appalachian State University. Her name is Dr. Sherry Everts. And Dr. Everts, Chancellor Everts, will be here on this program next week to talk about not just where the school is headed now, but following a beloved chancellor like Ken Peacock, how will she put her mark on the university? And then in a few weeks, immigration. This has not just come up as a national issue, but certainly in North and South Carolina, there's a large immigrant population making a pretty big dent in the economies of both states. We will have a dialogue about immigration in a few weeks. You know, they're the leading the leading builder of school buses in North America and have just cemented that position more firmly in the Tar Heel State. In just this past month, in October, the 95-year-old manufacturer announced a $12 million capital investment in High Point, which this company says will add over 200 jobs in North Carolina's Triad. Joining us again is Thomas Built Bus Chief Executive Officer, Kelley Platt. Well, Kelley, welcome back.
Thank you.
You were here 4 years ago, Kelley. It was 2010. Schools across the country were either revising their orders down for school buses or just doing away with them completely following 2008 and 2009. Tough time to take the job. You were on this program and were fairly upbeat, and I wouldn't say even cautiously upbeat. What have you learned in the last 4 years, and where are you now?
We've learned a lot in the last 4 years. We've learned how to be much smarter at manufacturing. We've learned how to compete, I think, in the North American market where maybe we weren't as smart as we were before. We've learned to find new customers. And we're very excited now to see that with the improvement in the economy, schools have a little bit more money. They're buying more buses, and we're taking more than our fair share of that market, which is what allows us to grow and hire more people.
What was it about going through 2010, 2011, and back here to 2014 and having sales come back up to where they are? But besides just cost cutting, what were the tough dialogues that you were having inside the company?
We really had to have tough dialogues about how many people we had. We did have to let some people go. Fortunately, we've hired back. And are now at a net gain in terms of the number of people we had. But that was a very difficult discussion to be able to say, people who'd been here for a long time, we had to learn how to do things differently without them.
How do you prep then for the next wave? Or so you don't get through that position of start again, stop again with employees? How do you make sure that doesn't happen?
We have been very, very careful. We've probably actually grown slower than we could have through this recovery, because I never want to have to tell somebody again that we don't have a job for them, because it's just too hard on people and on families. Mm-hmm. So we've this time around tried to grow slowly, tried to grow using overtime and weekend work as opposed to hiring people that we couldn't bring on permanently. And then we're investing in technology. And learning how to build more buses with fewer people or with a flexible number of people, mm-hmm. so that we don't disrupt lives. And when I offer people jobs today, I can feel confident that they're going to be our employees 15 or 20 years from now if they would like to be.
Mm-hmm. Lou?
You know, Kelley, there's a great discussion in this state, and Chris touched on it earlier about talent and workforce. Well, what are some of the things that your company is doing to make sure that you have the talent you need to be competitive and successful?
We are starting to work with various people in the community to make sure that we can grow that workforce over time. So whether it's working with Oak Hill, which is our local grade school, and I have to brag, they were the Title I Grade School of the Year 2 years ago, so we're very proud of our kids. But we're also working with Guilford County with their STEM program in the middle schools and high schools, and working with our local community colleges to develop programs to train our welders and our painters, robot technicians, so that we can have the kind of technically savvy workforce that we need.
Yeah, great.
Lonnie?
Well, when you said technically savvy workforce, that plays right into what we were saying about the fact that it is a changing demographic of what we're expecting. Have you been, kind of sharing some of that model with some of the schools and so forth in terms of, your requirements and your needs?
We have. We work with the schools. We will bring teachers in the summertime as sort of sponsored interns, if you will, to understand what sorts of jobs we have. We take our folks out to the schools to be able to go and teach kids about what we're looking for. And we also spend a fair amount of time retraining our own folks so that they can deal with the new technical requirements of their jobs.
Manufacturing, you think about, it's a manufacturing, Lou, you were talking about manufacturing. Manufacturing in North Carolina is a very substantial industrial sector. And here you have Thomas-built buses, a very tangible product that's manufactured in the Tar Heel State. So it would seem like, Kelley, that you are in a bit of a good position to everybody knows what a school bus looks like, and everybody knows what a Thomas-built school bus looks like. So how do you maybe leverage that goodwill and that kind of iconic product to highlight the fact that manufacturing is not the way manufacturing used to be? You talked a little bit about the technology overlaying into manufacturing, but what else about it that can you make manufacturing cool again, if you will?
One of the things that we found is very effective is to bring particularly college students or high school students into our facilities to actually see how we do things and to help us solve problems. So we worked with North Carolina A&T and other institutions to give them real life manufacturing problems to help as school projects, to help them see how it's very different. And there's a lot of math and science and technology that's involved in trying to solve those problems.
What kind of problems will they solve? I know you want to jump in here, Lonnie. What kind of problems will they solve?
We've had them help us work on how do you determine whether or not there's a child in the entrance door of the bus? How can you better get materials from a warehouse to a manufacturing line when they're all different sizes and shapes and weights? So it's a big puzzle. We've had people help us with some of our number crunching and our big data kinds of things that we really need. We need those new skill sets because a lot of us who've been around for a while aren't very good at it.
Yeah, go ahead, Lonnie.
Well, I was going to say that's a key element of IT-ology is this work-based learning concept, that really the idea of applied learning, right? Not that it's just content, but it's really how does it get applied in the workplace. We've also been promoting kind of this minor league farm system, if you will, for IT, which is really about internships and apprenticeships and those kind of things. Are you applying those concepts as well in how you're recruiting folks?
We are. We really feel very strongly about bringing in interns and giving them a chance to see what we're like and have a chance to be able to experience the business. And as a result of that, we get some very good and motivated employees if we can give them fun stuff to do and they actually understand what it's like to be able to build a bus.
Yeah, Lou?
Beyond talent, which obviously is the X factor for any company, I mean, what are some of the things that make manufacturing in North Carolina competitive and profitable for your company?
Talent is one of the most important things. We have a fantastic workforce here in North Carolina. We have a very stable workforce.
What's your total head count now?
We have just over 1,400 employees, so we'll be well over 1,600 by the time we get to March of next year, which is very exciting for us. But we also find that the local economic development community has been very supportive of us, both in our facilities span Randolph and Guilford County, and both counties have been very supportive of us through the downturn as well as when we go into our expansion.
Go ahead, Lonnie. I know you had something.
Well, not to stay on the talent issue for too long, but one of the things that we find is that you can participate in some of these programs, and yet not all of those folks that come through those programs with you may end up working for you. Do you see that is still a benefit to the community, because we are creating a ready workforce that if they've gained experience with you, then in turn they might benefit working for someone else? That's a real kind of community-wide approach to this talent issue. you find yourself kind of in that mode?
We know that we won't keep everybody, and that's probably a good thing. But as long as they've had good experiences and they can leave us better employees for somebody else than they were when we got them, then we've done a good thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned economic development, and just briefly, but you also talked about your expansion announced last month. 230 or so. You expect to have additional employment, which will bring your head count above 1,600. $12 million investment or so. So Kelley, go through with us the thought process that you had around economic development. Was it important to have incentives? Was it more important to know that you were going to have be able to expand easily into the footprint you already have? Was it important to know about partners? What was the most important dialogue? Because so often we talk about economic incentives as if it's a do or die part of growing a company. How do you look at that?
We looked at it, in this particular instance, we looked at it and said, incentives would make it easier for us to make this decision, but it's not the only factor that's a part of that decision. It was a factor that allowed us, I think, to put more technology in our facility and maybe make a little bit more of a quantum leap than we would have otherwise. We could have found a way to build as many buses, but maybe not quite as smartly if we had not had those incentives. But we feel like the incentives really helped us to say, okay, we're not going to take just the cheapest possible approach, we're going to take the best approach to what it is we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Lou?
You know, when you look at international competition, I mean, how do you stack up against, obviously there's manufacturers in other countries that you compete with. I mean, how do you compete on the world stage?
We actually do very little export business, but we hope that we're going to be able to grow that export business. And what we've found in the last several years, which has given us some thought that there's more of this available, is while our labor costs are higher, we're actually proud of that fact because we feel like we provide very good living wage jobs for our employees. And so we're proud of the fact that our labor costs are higher than they are in foreign countries, but we're far more efficient. And so we can build a product with less time and less effort than it would take someone else, and we build something that's of a higher quality. So we really like the fact that we manufacture in North Carolina and can send our products to other places.
That's great.
I'll bring a question closer to home. So here's parents whose school children are getting on buses every day. How is the technology being applied? I know you do some things with RFID and this ability to be able to recognize that a parent can feel confident that their student is on that bus and arrived where they're supposed to. How is that kind of giving a new sense of relationship to your customer?
The technology that's available today to track a bus, to be able to tell remotely whether or not it's got any problems, to be able to tell where it is, to be able to tell when the children get on and off, totally can transform the experience for a parent as well as a transportation director who's trying to keep track of his vehicles. Right. So it's exciting to us to see the kinds of things that are available on a school bus today that certainly weren't when I rode a Thomas Built bus.
What are the prohibitions to have, you talked about making the parent experience better. What would keep parents from being able to access a webcam on the bus? I mean, I'm sure
it's available, in some states
available
available. There's nothing that would prevent it from happening. The technology is available. I've actually seen it used in a couple of places in the United States. More commonly, though, you're starting to see systems available where the child will have a card that they swipe when they get on the bus. Yeah. So mom gets an email when he gets on the bus, mom gets an email when he gets off the bus. And so you know exactly when that child has been on and off the bus.
Kelley, thanks for being on the program. Nicely done. The last 4 years have not been easy, but you have not just survived but thrived, and I know High Point's been better for it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again. Lonnie, welcome to the program. Good to have you here.
It's been great.
And Lou, if you don't mind me shamefully plugging your future North Carolina Forum coming up in December, I'd tell folks to go to your website to find out more.
Yes.
You're running out of time, but
that'd be fun.
A big dialogue going on in North Carolina, and the North Carolina Chamber is shepherding that. Thank you for watching our program. Until next week, I'm Chris William. I hope your business and your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.